Hello and welcome back, adventurers. This is Captain TTRPG, and today we're talking about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Welcome back, adventurers. Captain TTRPG here with your subclass ranking for the Witch. That's right, the patrons for the Witch are up, and there are 16 subclasses to go through here. Now, keep in mind, we are also going to talk about the class archetypes for the Witch, but we won't do it in this video because this video is already going to be incredibly long. So those are going to get their own video, then they'll be added back to the ranking after the fact. But before we rank, we got to talk about what that criteria looks like. So let's jump in there real quick for anybody who doesn't already know it. S is for subclasses that are clearly mechanically stronger for combat, more so than other subclasses, while not falling behind in other pillars of play that naturally fit the class well. Basically, this is a subclass that becomes like the default or the right way to play the class. I don't think it comes up a lot in Pathfinder2e, but it does come up. A is a subclass that is strong in combat in any adventure, if not only strong on its own, but at least strong with the team as well. It's a cooperative team-based game after all, so keep in mind that it should work with the rest of your party. Also, it might lean into other strengths of the class if those include things like social or exploration. B is a subclass that is mechanically strong on its own or does a good job of boosting the rest of the party, but not necessarily both. It also may be exceptionally strong in certain campaigns, but not in others. It may also land here just because it does a good job, but it doesn't do an amazing job of boosting the class in any particular way. C is a subclass that lands here because it's just not great in almost any campaign. There might be a very, very narrow niche for it to fill, but other than that, it's just not going to make you feel a whole lot stronger than the base class does, or whatever it gives you is just so minor. Yeah, it's just not elevating you up. And D is a subclass that you might want to avoid, either because it's a trap, makes the class somehow just play improperly, where it just doesn't work with the style of play for that character, or it's just got terrible features that are nothings completely. Fantastic. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the Witch. So remember, we have 16 patrons to rank, but first we have to talk about what a patron gives you. So a patron gives you a few different things. First, it's going to choose your spell tradition. So every patron gives you a different spell tradition, either arcane, occult, primal, or divine. Then you get trained in a skill. It's going to give you a hex cantrip, which is your unique hex cantrip for your character. It's going to give you a level 1 spell. This just adds it as a spell known so that you can use it for your prepared slots. And it's going to give you a special familiar ability that only your familiar can have, that nobody else can get in any other way. These familiar abilities, by the way, always trigger when you cast a hex spell or hex cantrip. So they don't require actually instigating with any specific actions for the familiar itself. Like, you don't give the familiar 2 actions and then with one of those it uses this familiar ability. It's an ability that happens because you're using hex spells and hex cantrips. There are no feats that rely on your choice of patron, so don't worry about any of that. It's just what you get from the base level at level 1 that you get from your patron. So we don't have to think about, as we level up, what else could have been taken because you chose your patron. Nope. Level 1 is it. Starting off with Baba Yaga, this is rare, is the occult spell tradition. You get trained in occultism. Your hex cantrip is spirit object. You choose one object within 30 feet. It comes to life and you can move it 25 feet. This lasts for 1 minute, but nothing happens unless you sustain it. When you sustain it, either it attacks an adjacent enemy for 2d4 damage, and that's plus another 2d4 every heighten. Remember, these will auto heighten, they're cantrips, using your spell attack modifier, or you have to move it 25 feet, but not both. So it has to be next to an enemy if you're going to use the attack, otherwise you're going to be moving it when you sustain it. Your level 1 spell is Chilling Spray, which, by the way, Chilling Spray is not normally on the occult spell list. This is a decent 15-foot cone AoE damage spell with a movement reduction rider. The familiar ability is your familiar creates a 5-foot burst in a quarter of its square it's in, and enemies that enter are dazzled until the start of your next turn. This is not a save thing. They enter, they are dazzled. Done. I want to give a little nod to the different spell traditions and what's available to them when we approach them, which, having gone through all of the spells in the entire game, I feel like I can speak to decently well. The occult spell tradition offers quite a bit in the way of control, heavily in the way of control, especially through mental effects, but it's definitely more than that. There isn't much in the way of healing but you can get some stuff in there as well. The Hex cantrip does bring the object to life, but the cantrip doesn't specify if it can or can't be targeted. I'm going to assume it can't be because it didn't give stats around, you know, how many hit points it has or anything. So I'm going to guess it can't be targeted while it's alive. It also can't be used for flanking because it doesn't specifically say it can be, and otherwise this type of thing can't be. The fact that it lives for the full minute is nice, but not being able to do anything with it unless you sustain means there's a chance it could just end up too far from combat to be useful at some point. Remember, it only moves 25 feet if you sustain it, and if you're having to move it every time you sustain it, you're not attacking with it. If it stays in the area, it should at least have some use, right? Hopefully, you'll be able to make attacks with it here and there. I just don't find it to be the strongest cantrip, but it's not the worst either. Chilling Spray is a decent spell, not the strongest, but useful as a number of level 1 AoE options are, and there's just not a ton on the occult spell list for AoE options, so this is actually kind of a win for being a cult caster, having this added on top. The Familiar ability is all about positioning and controlling the battlefield. If you can set up a choke point, or if you want to protect a certain character, you can easily do so, as Dazzled is a solid debuff to a martial enemy. I like that Familiar doesn't have to be near the enemy, like meaning sharing a square. It can be, you know, catty corner to it, so you get a debuff that doesn't necessarily put your Familiar in as much harm, but it is still kind of in harm's way. Anyway, the fact that there's no save or anything means immediate value. You just have to position it really well. All in all, this isn't the strongest, but I still think that it's a nice combination of different abilities with the spell added to the spell list. I still think that this is an A and can be a really good controller. It's all about how you use your Familiar ability. Acquire Politic. This is divine spell tradition, gives you training in society. Your Hex cantrip is Share Vision. This lasts for 10 minutes, and you share vision with a friend, including dark vision and things like that. You both get a +2 status bonus to perception checks. If one is blinded or dazzled, though, you both are. Keep that in mind. Your level 1 spell is Share Lore, which is not on the divine list, by the way. The Familiar ability is the Familiar gives a +2 status bonus to the next non-attack skill check an adjacent ally makes. This one is pretty unique. Divine Spell Tradition gives you fantastic support spells, including things like Heal and Bless right away at level 1, which are fantastic. The Society skill is good as well, as it does come up in plenty of recall knowledge situations, because you're talking about any humanoid or anything, this is coming up. The Hex cantrip may not seem amazing on first glance. I don't think that it shows itself in its power immediately. There is utility in seeing what the other person sees, but it's better than that. Needing to see an enemy to target it with a spell means now you can see while safe and out of harm's way. And gaining the dark vision or other sight advantages of others is also a massive win. Or sharing yours with them. You might have greater dark vision, and now they have greater dark vision. And a +2 to perception checks means a +2 status bonus to your initiative most of the time if you share before combat. So if you know what's coming up, 10 minutes is long enough to do that. So there's a lot to like with the 10-minute cantrip. The problem is you don't need to sustain it. Normally, that would feel like a very good thing. But with the way your Familiar's ability works, it only goes off when you sustain or cast a Hex spell or Hex cantrip. Now you don't have to do that. So because of that, if you want to trigger it, you can still use a sustain action as far as I know, but you're not doing it for any particular reason other than triggering the ability. Now you can still use a Hex spell, and this opens up maybe more use of Hex spells over having to constantly use your Hex cantrip, which is cool, but I don't know, there's some weirdness there. At least it feels a little off. Speaking of that Familiar ability, it can be great with certain allies. It is amazing for recall knowledge checks, but any character using Demoralize, Feint, Tumble Through, I mean, they're all going to be excited, right? These are really solid, and especially if you've got an ally who's going to use like Grapple or anything, +2 is massive. And this is why it's weird that it's not set up to be used by constantly, you know, using your Hex cantrip with a sustain action. And I need to look up again, and I'll put it on screen here if it's allowed or not, to use the sustain action when a spell doesn't need sustaining, because I feel like it doesn't allow that, but I will check. Anyway, it really depends on if your adjacent allies, though, need to use skill actions. So you're going to want to set it up in a way that it's next to an ally that's going to use skill actions. And you know the allies who do. And I think a lot of people should use them, even if they don't, but you definitely know the allies who are most likely to use them. Also, I don't love share lore. It's fine, but I wouldn't use it often, I don't think. I'd probably never prepare it. So the rest of it's good, though. And again, I think this is a great way to play a support witch, which is why I'm actually going to give this an A as well, because the other aspects of it are really solid. Just don't care too much about the spell it gives you. Cobyslarni, which is rare. I never feel like I'm saying that right. So probably not. Occult Tradition gives the occultism skill training. The Hex cantrip is Information Overload. This forces a will save on an enemy, or it becomes Stupefied 1 on a fail, Stupefied 2 on a crit fail. If it fails or crit fails, you sustain it up to a minute, keeping that debuff going. So when you first cast it, if they crit fail, just keep sustaining it and they will keep that crit fail going. They don't get a new save. It just stays that way. Level 1 spell that gets added is Deja Vu. This is on the occult list. You're not getting something fresh and new. The familiar ability is the familiar gets a free recall knowledge using your bonuses, whatever that is, for the recall knowledge check, for any skill in which you are at least trained. So basically you get a free recall knowledge. Essentially that's what's going on here when you sustain or cast a hex spell or cantrip. We already talked about occult spells, so nothing there. This cantrip lines up well with them in my mind. There are quite a few will save spells in the tradition that can gain from Stupefied on a target. Your allies can take advantage of it as well, but keep in mind it's one action for you to do it, so you can set yourself up for a solid will save required spell going off right after this. There's no incapacitation on the Hex cantrip, so even if it's a boss monster, you're knocking down their checks. It does only have an effect, though, on fail or crit fail, so nothing on save. Just keep that in mind. Not as big a deal with a cantrip, I don't think, as with a spell slot being used, but still good to know. The spell Deja Vu is pretty underwhelming. It also only has an effect on fail, and it might even then be almost useless to you, or just let them do what they want to do anyway, so I wouldn't probably prepare that one. As for the familiar ability, I do like it. Your familiar will be safe, but you can still gain recall knowledge, and you'll probably be casting or sustaining regularly because of the Hex cantrip you've got. It isn't a massive effect. There is no control or buff aspect, but knowledge is great to have. Even so, this one feels a little bit more mid to me, which is why I'm going to give it a B, but it's still good. But I still think it's worth considering if you're going to be a controller. Devourer of Decay, Primal spell tradition, gives you the nature skill. Your Hex cantrip is Scrounger's Glee. You force a will save against one creature, or it becomes Frightened 1, Frightened 2 on a crit fail. This can't go away while you're sustaining the spell. You can use a reaction to dismiss this when an ally crits that enemy to heal the ally that did the critting 1d4 hit points, heightened 1d4 every 2 spell ranks. The level 1 spell added to your list is Enfeeble, which is not normally on the primal spell list, so that's nice. And the familiar ability is one creature in 15 feet of your familiar that's bloodied must make a fortitude save or become sickened 1. Our first primal subclass, Primal has solid support, really good damage spells. There are some control aspects in here. Primal's a pretty solid tradition all the way around. There's some things it's missing, but it's got a lot in there, especially damage. Tons of damage in there, if that's what you're looking for. And not as much control as something like a cult would have. Anyway, the Hex cantrip, Frightened is a fantastic debuff. It just is. And it's bound for the fact that it goes away naturally. This doesn't. As long as you're sustaining it, they stay frightened. You essentially debuff their level by 1 or 2 if they crit failed, and you just keep it debuffed like that, which is really strong. So that's really nice to have. This is definitely stronger than Stupefied. It's not even in the same realm as each other. So yes, we have a strong cantrip here. This spell Enfeeble is not good. The effect is bad. I would never cast it. Yes, I know it's not normally on the spell list, but who cares? It's bad. it has an effect when they succeed on their save, but it's so bad you just don't care. The familiar ability, though, to potentially inflict Sickened One can be strong, as that is actually worse than Frightened, but it has a save and is only against bloodied characters. Both of those combined means that this won't go off that often. At least it has decent range to it and a great effect, but it's just unlikely to work regularly. But again, it's going off every turn, so, you know, those two kind of cancel out. Yes, it's not likely to work out, and that to be bloody, but you're able to trigger it often, but not every time, because not everything's always bloodied, and if they are, they're probably about to die. Really what this is being propped up by is that Hex Cantrip, which I think is a really solid Hex Cantrip. This does hold it up, but I still think this is a B because it's really held up just by that. Faith's Flamekeeper, this is a divine tradition. You have the religion skill trained. Hex Cantrip is Stoke the Heart. You give a creature in 30 feet a +2 status bonus to damage rolls, which is sustained up to 1 minute, and this increases +1 every 2 spell ranks. The level 1 spell given is Command, which is on the divine list already, but a good spell. The familiar ability is one ally in 15 feet gains temp HP equal to 2 plus half your level for 1 round. So we talked about the bonuses of the divine spell tradition. Cool. Our cantrip and familiar ability definitely fall in line here. The Hex Cantrip is simple, but getting the most out of it isn't. The first thought I had was, okay, toss it on a marshal for some base rage type damage bonus to buffs, and hey, that's an option, you can do it. But damage rolls aren't done by marshals the most important way they can be to gain the most value out of this, because it's attacking one creature. However, when you cast Fireball, you also roll damage. But you might hit 4 enemies, and suddenly that +2 damage is +8 damage, or something, depending on saves, blah, blah, blah. The heightening isn't good, but probably, because of the AoE nature of the buff, it would be too strong if they buffed it any more than this. Is this the strongest Hex Cantrip? No. But it plays into a specific style, which is this more kind of blaster style, either for you or somebody else. It is pretty solid. Command is already on the spell list. Again, we talked about that, but it's you know, it's pretty decent. And so it's not a huge win, the fact that you could have gotten it already, but it's free, and I would like to prepare it. I would like to add it to my spell list, so I'm not upset about it. And then we have the familiar ability granting temp HP, potentially a decent amount. This doesn't have to be the same ally each turn. You choose the best target based on what the enemies are doing, where people's health is at, whatever, and it won't feel like it's wasted almost ever. As long as you target well, it's going to feel good. You're basically free healing the party every single round just for sustaining something you already want to sustain, which is adding damage. I like this. I actually think this is a really cool combination that plays for a very, very different kind of witch, and I'm going to give this an A. I don't think you'll be sad to play this at all. Mosquito Witch Primal gives nature. Your Hex Cantrip is Buzzing Bites. One target in 30 feet makes a Fortitude save against 1d4 piercing damage with Sickened One on a crit fail, and they can't get rid of Sickened while you sustain. You heighten 1d4 damage every spell rank. The spell added to your list is Pest Form, which is already on your list, and your familiar gives concealment to any ally sharing its space for the turn. The Hex Cantrip is one of my least favorites. The most common outcome for saves, and fort save is a terrible one to target, is success, followed by failure. Crit failures are extremely rare, so the Sickened will almost never come up. The problem is that on a save, you are probably dealing 1 damage, and on a fail, you are dealing 2. Neither of which is going to have much of an effect on the battle at all. At least it increases by d4 every spell rank. It's still never going to feel amazing, even for one action. Now, one action, at least dealing just a couple damage, doesn't feel horrible, but it doesn't feel good. Pest Form is something that I normally wouldn't have prepared, so I guess I kind of like it here. It's really utility, and sometimes it's nice to have utility granted to you for free, but would I actually prepare a slot with it? Not unless I knew I was going to need it. So it's one of those things I probably wouldn't give a preparation slot to, but at least having it on the spell list, I guess, is kind of nice for free. As for the familiar ability, It's pretty solid to throw Concealed on an ally, you know, especially if you're worried about them, somebody ranged who's been taking a lot of damage. Making them Concealed is nice, but Familiar does have to stay in the ally space to give it the bonus. Not a huge hurdle, and negating 20% of attacks a character is targeted with is some nice solid defense. Even so, I don't think this one escapes C tier for me. It's not like a deep C, like it's kind of close to B, but nothing comes together in a way that makes me feel like it sits alongside that B list. I really think you would struggle to find where this is a better choice than other options. Paradox of Opposites. This is Divine, gives you religion. Trade death for life. This deals 1d4 damage against a fort save, and if it damages, it gives one ally fast healing 1 while you sustain. The damage is only taken once though, so it's just damage once, and then you can sustain it if it did damage to give fast healing 1. Heightened by 1d4 damage and fast healing 1 every spell rank. The spell added is Sleep. Sleep is not traditionally on the Divine list, so that's nice. And the Familiar ability, the Familiar makes one creature in 20 feet stupefied 1 until next turn. No save. Okay, let's not be subtle. I don't like this Hex cantrip. If you succeed at dealing damage, which means the creature, you know, didn't crit succeed, and they may not take any damage from a fail on, or from a succeed on level 1, then you sustain 1 healing to an ally each turn. But you don't deal damage with this again. You just deal that 1 healing to one ally. So you spend 1 action each turn to give an ally 1 hit point. That's terrible. Or you gamble and cast the Hex cantrip new each turn to at least try to do some damage, but then sometimes you won't deal any damage, and then you also won't be the healing. It's just poor design, in my mind. Sustaining it, you should be able to keep dealing whatever damage you did to that same creature and give the fast healing, and it still wouldn't be overpowered or anywhere near overpowered. It would be fine. Then we have Sleep, which is a decent spell at low-level targets, but it has the Incapacitate trait, so that's going to make it feel a lot worse. At least it's not on the Divine list, so again, it is a net gain in that way, and there's times I could see preparing it. So I don't love the kit entirely. Then we get to the Familiar ability, which is fantastic. Just choose a creature in 20 feet, and it's stupefied 1. No save, just happens. Sets you and allies up to go after their will saves, or just target a caster and decrease its effectiveness. But keep in mind, you have to be casting that Hex cantrip or, you know, Hex spell from a focus point. And you don't want to have to cast your Hex cantrip because it's terrible. In fact, your normal spellcasting cantrips are better than this cantrip every time. The Familiar ability saves the Patron from a D, because that's where I was going with it. And I'm going to give it a C, but I do not like this at all, except that Familiar ability, which is really solid. Ripple in the Deep. This is primal, gives you nature. You get Sting of the Sea. You target one creature in 30 feet that must make a fort save against a -2 circumstance penalty to perception checks, or they become dazzled or even blinded, depending on their save. So it makes a save each turn, and you can sustain it up to a minute. So the save's happening every single turn. Keep in mind that perception checks on a success, dazzled on a failure, and blinded on a crit fail. The level 1 spell you're given is Dizzying Colors or Grease. You choose. Dizzying Colors is not on the primal spell list. Grease is on the primal spell list. I would take Dizzying Colors, although Grease is good too. I might just prepare both. The Familiar ability is your Familiar pushes a creature within 10 feet, 5 feet away from it. The Hex cantrip has an effect on success on the save, and that effect really only harms their ability to seek, and similar actions as like initiative have already happened. So dazzled, though, is a good condition to inflict, and blinded is fantastic. But like with all these, don't count on the crit fail effect. So let's say that you really lean on that dazzled effect. That's okay. Dazzled is still good. It is a good effect to put on an enemy, especially a melee enemy that's running up and trying to attack things with strikes. One thing I really don't like is that the creature gets a new save each turn when you sustain. With other Hex cantrips that are sustained, once you get a bad outcome from the enemy, you can just keep it going, right? You can keep recasting until they fail or crit fail and then just hold them in it. This time, they're going to end up only dazzled once in a while, right? They'll probably end up with a success more times than not. So that's not ideal, but it lowers the power of the Hex cantrip, but not to make it terrible. It's just, it lowers it. Unfortunately, that does make it one of my, well, not one of my least favorite, but it's definitely not in the upper echelon of Hex cantrips. Getting to choose between 2 spells that you're granted is fantastic. And again, I already said I would take Dizzying Colors, and I'd probably still take Grease. I just take them both. They're both good. So, love that. AoE Dazzled or Blinded is good. Battlefield Control is good. Good spells. Like that. The Familiar ability, well, you'll probably get to use it a fair amount of the time. Though being within 10 feet of an enemy means you won't be able to use it 100% of the time, because your Familiar won't always be within 10 feet of an enemy, but you can probably set that up so it happens often enough. Anyway, when it works, the 5-foot push is going to feel probably underwhelming unless you really set up for it. So if you set up a situation where, you know, you've got some dangerous situation that you can push them back into, great, but 5 feet just isn't that far. So it really depends on what you've got set up with your allies. Keep in mind this is forced movement, so it's not going to trigger reactive strikes or anything. It can be solid if your party's planning for it and you've got allies who can also push and move creatures around, then you're just another one of those. If it somehow was more than 5 feet, or you could make it more than 5 feet, even just 10 feet, I think this would make a huge difference. I also don't love that you really have to send your creature up in danger, but a lot of them, you know, do have to do that for the familiars to feel like they're being useful. If it was more than 5 feet, I'd like it a lot more. Even so, it's okay. The Hex cantrips, okay, but they're still both kind of below average to me. The spells are the only thing I actually like coming off this. I was between a B or a C on this, and I'm going to drop this one down to a C as well. Silence in the Snow. This is primal. Gives you the nature skill. You have the Hex cantrip Clinging Ice. This is 1d4 cold damage and a movement speed reduction on a reflex save, -5 on a fail and -10 on a crit fail, just being explicit, and you sustain it up to 1 minute. The level 1 spell is Gust of Wind, which is already on the primal spell list, and the familiar ability, your familiar creates 5-foot burst in a corner of one of its square, so you choose a corner, 5-foot burst from there, and that creates difficult terrain until the next turn. So we have another 1d4 damage cantrip, but this time the damage occurs on sustain as well. So you hit them, they fail or crit fail, and you get to sustain it and they keep taking the damage. So we at least have regular damage throughout the fight. The rider on the fail or crit fail isn't the most powerful, but it means that positioning does matter. Speed penalties can hurt, and you combine speed penalties up with difficult terrain, and they really, really, really hurt. So handled well, this can be really strong. The issue is that unless the whole party is being careful about positioning, it won't matter as much. So a melee combatant past the first round and ranged creatures won't care at all, generally speaking, about the speed penalty, but it can hurt them. I still don't think it's as strong as some of the other effects we've seen, like Frightened or Sickened, things like that are stronger than this, but it's not bad. I like it at least, and I like that it sustains the damage as well. Gust of Wind is a decent enough battlefield control spell at level 1, but it's already on the primal spell list, so not a huge win here. Then we have the familiar ability. This does work directly with the Hex cantrip, which is good by design, right? So if you set up the difficult terrain and they've got the penalty to movement, they're really not going to get very far. It might incentivize them to attack your familiar, which is unfortunate. Otherwise, I really like it. So if you have a GM who's likely to attack your familiar, this is a really dangerous pairing. But if that's not the case, this can feel good. Anyway, it's still a win in my book. I like the two. I like when things play together like this. I like that you can create choke points. You can set up really good situations where creatures just have a hard time moving around or getting to your allies because you set this up, that your familiars, you know, combining with other effects you might have, really holding down any narrow situation. I like that a lot. This was between a few things for me. I considered a few things. I'm actually going to go ahead and give this a B, because I do think it's designed well, even if I don't think it's the strongest. That's me just kind of encouraging the overall design. But again, that's assuming your GM isn't going to just target your familiar. If you know they are, this is a C. Spinner of Threads. This is occult. Gives you the occultism skill training. You gain the Hex cantrip Nudge Fate, gives a 1-minute boost to an ally, giving +1 to a failed or crit failed attack, save, or skill check if it changes the outcome. And then the spell ends. You throw it on, and then it waits there. And then if, again, they just fail by 1, it triggers itself, and they don't fail. Their fail goes to a success, or crit fail goes to a fail. The level 1 spell added is Sure Strike, which is already on the occult list. The familiar ability gives a creature within 15 feet of the familiar a +1 status to AC or a -1 status to AC. The Hex here is an interesting one. The fact that an ally has it until it's used is good, in the fact that you don't have to cast or sustain it every round, but also means that you aren't triggering your familiar's ability as often, unless you are switching it around. Or does it? If you want to trigger your familiar again, you can just cast it again and override the previous one, right? It's one of those things where, and again, you could have done this with the site earlier. That one just seemed like a stranger situation. You can just override it. That's fine. The sustain thing doesn't come up. You can just override it. It's a long enough distance. Fine. Okay. So there's that. And then you have to ask, how often is this going to come up? How often will a +1 change crit fail to fail or fail to success? It's not going to come up all the time. It might come up once in a combat. You might help out one time, but you don't even know which ally it's going to help for. So you're really guessing. Turning a failed grapple to a success can change the outcome of a critical moment in battle, though. So don't think it's useless, because when it does have an effect, especially turning a fail into a success, it can be immense, and it is on a ton of checks. So the frequency, kind of washes out the reliability a bit. It becomes more reliable because of the frequency alone, and at least you're giving it every time to somebody, which can feel nice. Sure Strike is on the list, which makes it less valuable, and I don't really like it on a witch so much, because it's not like you're casting it on somebody else, you're casting it on yourself. If you play a Gish witch, okay, you might get some value out of it, but because I do like it as a Gish spell for rank 1, I just don't think that's what you're doing with your witch, but you might be. The familiar ability I love, which is why I mentioned just recasting Nudge Fate. To get value from your familiar, you just need to have somebody, enemy or ally, within 15 feet. Increasing your ally's AC by +1. Really solid. Decreasing enemy AC by 1. No save. Solid. Not as good as frightening them or something, but solid. So yeah, it's always going to feel good. You're never going to not get value out of the familiar ability. You want to trigger it. Everything being said, I do think you'll get value out of what's offered here, with the exception of the spell. And I do think that leaves this at a solid B. It's a solid B. It's not a low B. This is a solid B. Starless Shadow. This is occult spell tradition. Gives training in the occultism skill. The Hex cantrip is Shroud of Night. You force a will save on a creature in 30 feet. On a fail, it treats bright light as dim light, and all creatures are concealed to it unless it has greater dark vision, which almost nothing does. Allies can choose to fail if they want that to be the case, and it is sustained up to 1 minute. You get Fear added to your spell list. It's already on the spell list because it's on every spell list, but it's good. And the familiar ability is, if your familiar is adjacent to a creature it's concealed or hidden from, that creature is frightened 1. Our Hex cantrip here does nothing on a successful save, which I don't like. On a fail or crit fail, the outcome is the same, so you just need a fail, and against the right enemy can be a massive challenge. While all creatures are concealed to you, you have a 20% chance to lose any targeted action you take. This is a powerful debuff, assuming you don't put it on creatures that can just throw out AoE spells or something, don't care, right? They're just throwing out saves. But still, it's only on a fail, and if the creature has greater dark vision, it does nothing. Again, that's very few creatures, at least for a long time. So don't worry too much about that. Using it on an ally can occasionally be advantageous, but you probably won't ever do that. The spell you gain, Fear, is fantastic. I love it. It's one of my favorite rank 1 spells. Just really good. If you watched my rank 1 spell video, I brought it up. It's really good to upcast it to 3rd rank. It's just good. Take it. Even if you aren't getting it for free, take it. So for free, I'll take it. So nice to have there. The familiar ability is really good if you can get the situation set up, and that's hard. Frighten 1 is, of course, a great thing to put onto an enemy. Not having a save is fantastic, but you need to keep your familiar adjacent to a creature that's already pretty much only failed against your Hex cantrip. It's really interesting that any creature adjacent to your familiar is affected if your familiar is concealed to it, which means if you dazzled multiple creatures and they're adjacent to it, great, they can all be frightened. Or if you have cast some way to make your creature invisible, everything it's next to, it is concealed to or better, which means they're always frightened one if you just move it around next to them. This is something that if you figure out how to abuse it, can be a great way to just keep frightened on some enemies you want to keep frightened on turn after turn after turn, as long as you're triggering its ability and keeping it there, which can be the struggle, because you have to use your Hex cantrip and keep your familiar next to an enemy. So there are some cool things to this. I think there are ways to use it in a really good fashion, but you have to be really smart about how you play it. The Hex cantrip can be good if used wisely. This takes some creative gameplay, which is why I don't think it's the easiest. I don't think it's the strongest, but it can be good. I'm going to give it a B, like I've done with a lot of them here. I promise they're not all that way. They just keep landing in this B for me, which is weird. I don't think I've ever ranked this many B all up front, but still, I think it belongs there. The Inscribed One. This is Arcane spell tradition, finally. Gives us the Arcana skill training. You get Discern Secrets. You give one creature in 30 feet the ability to recall knowledge, seek, or sense motive as a free action with a +1 status bonus. Once you have stopped sustaining this, that target's immune for 1 minute. This is heightened to 2 characters once you're using it as a 5th rank, which is level 9. Your level 1 spell added is Runic Weapon, which is on the Arcane list. Your familiar ability is the familiar is able to flank with you and allies until next turn. This is a visual effect. Keep in mind, familiars aren't normally available for flanking purposes. And hey, we have an Arcane Patron. Arcane has so many strengths. Just, oh boy, it is so many of the spells live on the Arcane list. It's good at almost everything. It doesn't have great healing. That's where it falls apart, but pretty much anything else you can do on the Arcane list. Our Hex cantrip here is about buffing the party. I'm not sure why it needs to make the party member immune afterward. I don't think it's good enough for that. But free recall knowledge is great. A +1 bonus to that free recall knowledge is really great. Seek and sense motive come up, but they're not crazy powerful. I mean, when you need seek, you need seek. Usually the first action a player looks to take, unless you are fighting nothing but invisible creatures, and sense motive is out of combat, which still matters, is to seek. So, that's weird. Anyway, while the boost is strong, it will depend on your party. Do you have an investigator or a thaumaturge? This is just amazing. In other cases, it's useful, but it depends on if your party likes to do those types of things, if they've taken enough skills that they can use these properly. The spell we get, Runic Weapon, is on the Arcane list, and it's not the biggest deal. It's fine. It's okay. It's really good at rank 1, so keep that in mind, because casting it on an ally and their weapon gets buffed by a massive amount at rank 1, that's worth it. After you get a few levels in there, it's not as good. Anyway, cast on a martial ally, you won't be zapped. The familiar ability is also a win for those martial characters, but specifically melee combatants. Having another creature to flank with is a boost every time, especially if you have a martial that's willing to wait until you set it up, so they basically wait and get out of order, then follow you in order, so you can always set up the flanking. That can be a great way to, say, set up a rogue, or just anybody who wants to hit hard and get a higher chance at crits. You throw this and constantly flank with a fighter, you're going to be critting basically every round. So it can be great, but it is still just flanking, and other allies could flank with them as well. It's going to blow your mind. It's another solid B. It's good. It helps allies, but it's not crazy. There are downsides, and I don't think it's great for every build or every campaign. We just keep landing in B. That's not a bad sign. If we have most of ours at Bs, it means they're pretty equal to each other. Until we got here. The Resentment. This is occult spell tradition. You get occultism training. You get Evil Eye. One creature in 30 feet must make a fort save or become sickened 1 on a fail, sickened 2 on a crit fail. Can't be reduced below sickened 1 while the spell is active, and you can sustain it up to 1 minute. Enfeeble is added as your level 1 spell, but it's already on the spell list. Your familiar ability. The familiar curses a creature in 15 feet to prolong all negative conditions another round. This only works for conditions that have some sort of time listing, like they last 1 round or 1 minute or until the end of next turn, which is most of them. The Hex cantrip here is much like Scrounger's Glee and Devourer of Decay, but with Sickened instead of Frightened, and it is good. Sickened is like Frightened in power, but takes at least 1 action to get rid of, which can't even work here because you literally can't lose it as long as the spell is being sustained. That's gross. So yes, nothing happens on success, but on failure and crit fail, it is disgusting, and you can just keep casting until you get one of those, and once they've got it, they're stuck. And Feeble is not great. We talked about it. Just ignore it. It's not valuable. The familiar ability is absolutely broken. And I don't say that lightly. If you or your allies can land any debuffs, negative status effects, whatever, on a creature, even just 1 round, you can keep them going for free forever as long as you can reposition your familiar and then use a Hex cantrip. Basically, this can let you keep 1 creature in a crippled heap of failure an entire combat. Nothing we have seen matches that power. This is S tier. It'll always be good. It will always be painful against a creature you use this against, and you can just heap on horrible things that will never leave. So many spells still have an effect on success, but only lasts 1 round. For you, it can last forever. That's gross. The Unseen Broker. Occult with occultism. You get the Hex cantrip Pact Broker. The creature has the option to take a deal and not harm you and your allies. If it does attack and took the deal, when it saves, it gets a worse outcome. Otherwise, when the creature harms your party, it must make a will save against 2d4 mental damage and a -1 penalty to attack and damage rolls, or -2 on a crit fail. Nothing happens on success. This can be sustained up to a minute. They're immune for 1 minute after you stop sustaining. The spell is Command, which is on the spell list. The familiar ability, your familiar chooses a creature in 10 feet that becomes off guard until the start of your next turn. There's no save there, it's just off guard. Let's be real, enemies aren't taking the pact to not fight you and your allies. So, while possible, I'm going to ignore that as an option. Looking at the Hex cantrip, assuming they don't agree to the pact, while it has no success outcome, the failure is solid. 2d4 damage is already good. We've seen lots of things that are 1d4. 2d4 is much better. So for 1 action, that's actually really solid damage. -1 to attack and damage rolls is also great for you and your team. Sure, don't target a caster with it, but any martial enemy, this is going to hurt them. And 1 minute immunity shouldn't matter much, except if you have a creature that succeeds, you won't be able to retarget it again. But as long as it fails, you just sustain it, and then you're fine. Command is a solid spell. We've already talked about it. It's already on the occult list. Cool. The familiar ability is also just solid. Are there lots of ways to make a creature off guard? Sure. But this one's so easy. And you're just saying, hey, you're off guard. Nobody has to set up flanking. Nobody has to hit them with any other spell or effect. It's just they're off guard for free with no check. So this just goes from strength to strength. Is it as absolutely busted as the last one? No. But man, is it good, and it's going to set up a team to succeed together in really easy ways. So for me, this is an A. I really like it. Not broken, but good. We're almost near the end, guys. We're getting close. Whisper of Wings. Primal with nature. You get the Hex cantrip Murmuration. You make a creature make a will save each time it moves closer to a second designated creature each turn, taking sonic or piercing damage. On a crit fail, it takes 1d4 of each and has a -2 to attack rolls it makes at that creature. You heighten +1, and it adds another d4 or d4 of each type on a crit fail. So on a regular fail, it's going to take just sonic or piercing. Right, a d4 of one or the other. The level 1 spell it gives you is Gentle Landing, which is on the spell list. The familiar ability, your familiar can fly up to 15 feet. Okay. I don't like this. The Hex is pretty weak. First, the creature might not even care to move closer to the other ally you designated. So if that happens, nothing happens, even if it failed its save. If it does want to move towards said ally, it will take a tiny amount of damage. The only way it's more than a tiny amount of damage is on a crit fail, and as I brought up many times, if you're relying on crit fails, it's probably not what you want to do, because you're going to be sad the fact that it almost never comes up. Now, something underwhelming like this can still be made up for by a great familiar ability. We don't have that. Moving your familiar out of harm's way is nice, but compared to the other abilities that can cripple enemies, keep things, going that you want to keep going, buff allies, this is just, okay, I got my familiar away. Great. It's extra movement from your familiar for free on that round, but you don't need your familiar to be near them. I just don't see why this is helpful. It'd be helpful if your familiar being near an enemy was helping you, but it's not. I don't know. And then you get Gentle Landing. So this is a spell we haven't talked about, but it's already on the primal list, so not really a win that way. It's a reaction to save an ally when they're falling. I probably wouldn't prepare it unless I knew I needed it. I guess it's helpful in that case because I'd never add it to my spells known anyway. I mean, unless I was just adding, spells during downtime, but otherwise I'd never just choose this. This is bad. This is D tier bad. This isn't doing anything like what the others are doing. I just don't think it's redeemable. I really, really dislike this patron. Wilding Steward, our last one, primal, nature. Wilding Word is our hex cantrip. One creature in 30 feet makes a will save or takes penalties anytime it targets you with an attack or skill check. On a success, it will still take a -2 to that roll. On a failure, same, but also becomes sickened 1 for damaging you. On a crit fail, it becomes sickened 2 for damaging you. The level 1 spell, you can either add summon animal or summon plant or fungus. Your familiar ability is your familiar gains an imprecise sense to 60 feet and can point out as a free action. So this is a decent defensive hex, but it only helps you, which I don't love. I wish you could have it help your allies in some way, but it's only for you, so it's just protecting you. Yes, it means that if you have a creature coming after you, this can be gross to them. I mean, one, they're less likely to hit you, and if they do, possibly becoming sickened, all of that is good. So that's nice, and I don't want to ignore that. Again, becoming sickened can just be brutal. It's hard to get rid of. Then again, it's only here to help you out. And again, I want to really stress that. If you target a creature that ends up going after an ally, this does nothing at all. In the best case scenario, the creature comes after you, takes a reduced chance to hit. If it hits you, well, okay, it's at least now sickened, depending on its save, and it's in all kinds of trouble. If it misses, thanks to the -2, great, it did its job. You didn't get hit. Cool. So I don't dislike it. I just wish it was for more than just you. The spell to choose here, from adding to the list, they're both on the primal list. So it's kind of not amazing. I'd probably, I don't know. The summon options between them, think about it. It depends. I might go with animal just because I like animal, but I think you get cooler status things out of plant or fungus. So decide what you want. The familiar ability has some merit, but not enough that you can care enough whether it goes off turn after turn. Yeah, there may be situations where an enemy needs to be found, but I don't care enough to have a free ability for them to try to point out a creature every round. That's just not going to be helpful in most combats. The once every 3 sessions that it really comes in handy, just don't do it for me. The Hex cantrip, I feel like, basically put this in B territory, and everything else brought it down. So I'm going to toss this in the C bucket. Sad way to end off, but true. And there you go. 16 patrons down. I know a lot of them ended up in B. I actually think that's probably a positive thing. We do have S. We do have D. We hit every single area in our tier ranking, which is kind of fun. But I didn't care if it ended up that way. It just kind of went that way. It is rare, though, to see both S and D exist together in the same ranking. There you go. Are you a huge fan of Whisper of Wings, or maybe you think I overrated the resentment? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, adventure on.